Okay, so indeed, I will talk about polyrepositories, monorepo. I know it's a interesting debate to talk about. But yeah, maybe, and yeah, another one, which is we should all merge our repository into a monorepo. This is quite hype today, right? But before talking about polyrepo, the polymonorepo, let's have a look on the benefit of each architecture. So yeah, it can be interesting still to use polyrepository when you want really to have kind of an isolation, if you have multiple teams and they are not really interacting between each other. It's also really interesting for the security side, right? If you really want to be sure people cannot have access to other repositories, then polyrepositories is still valuable, right? It's not mandatory by default to use a monorepo approach. So on the other side, you have the monorepo. So the monorepo, yeah, there are other benefits. If, for example, you have one organization, multiple teams, and they are working together oftentimes, and you want to be sure you can share a lot of code, monorepo can be valuable, right? If you want also to improve the collaboration in your teams, it's also a good way. We talk about technical aspect, but the collaborations of the team will be increased when you have a monorepo because they will have to talk together. So yeah, and it's also good if you want to capitalize on the way you are using your tools and the way the workflows for your software developments. So they both have benefits, and yeah, maybe we can take the benefits of both architecture. And yeah, in a way, this is what I want to present today. It's an architecture when we'll have multiple monorepo. So we will have isolations, we'll have security, we will have maybe teams working on different time zones and we don't want to share the same code. And we will have we will also have the monorepo principle where each team will be able to reuse some tooling and some way of working. So we'll have first one central monorepo, which is the monorepo for your organization, where you will have your main applications, and you will have the distributed monorepo. This is the monorepos where you will spread your way of working. So I am Jonathan Gelin. I am freelance software engineer, and yeah, my daily job is just to support in general large organization, improving their software development cycle. So I'm trying to, in any step of deploying application, I'm trying to see where we can improve their way of working. And yeah, I'm kind of really deep in NX, so I'm trying also to implement that project, that technology. Who knows NX, by the way? Okay, good. Who is using NX? Okay, great. All right, so I will present today the poly monorepo with NX, the best of the two worlds. So first of all, what are the use cases? What are the possibilities for using this kind of architecture? So yeah, usually it's for large organization, but for example, I worked for an organization where they were kind of selling a brand, so they had some franchise monorepo, so they have a lot of tools, and for each country, they kind of have different companies implementing the same tools for the country, and they wanted to maintain all of these monorepos. So they were providing a framework, a way of working, but they were providing also the hosting and the infrastructure around that. And yeah, maybe just before SaaS product too, I worked for that too. You are kind of implementing some software, and you also allow other companies to implement the same type of software. So you can also provide a framework and provide this list of tools. So you have kind of a big monorepo, and you kind of provide all of these tools to be able to facilitate the implementation of these applications. Or maybe you are NX. Why I'm putting that? It's because NX is doing that in a way. They have a big monorepo, and they are supporting many different monorepos by providing a lot of features. For the people who doesn't know NX, so NX, it's I would say not just a framework today. It's an ecosystem. It's really a way to facilitate the to improve your software development cycle by providing a lot of features that we are implementing again and again. And it's also, I like to also present NX as a generalization of what you do in any type of technology. So when we talk about monorepo, we often talk also about mixing technologies in that repositories. So for example, when you want to execute some task for a Java application, a React application, whatever, we are also doing some tests for this kind of technologies, and this will allow to unify that way of working. So it will try to, because this is one of the core concepts of the monorepo is the unification. So it will try to be sure to hide the complexity of each technology and be sure everyone is using those technologies in the same way. They also provide a cloud, a way to build your repository, because NX provides features and a graph of dependencies for your different projects and application. And because it knows how your projects are related, what are the dependencies between each project, it can build your monorepo in really efficient way. So that's a bit, an overview of what is NX, but I listed a list of plugins, a list of, features here. You can check the documentation if you want to get more information, or not hesitate to come to me after the talk. All right, so I will, to be able to achieve this kind of architecture, I specified 4 phases. So the first one is kind of focused on your central monorepo. Before being able to spread your way of working, you have to implement, to follow some best practices in your main monorepo. So the first step is conventions matters. It's just one of the core principles of any type of development in general, right? We try to unify our way of working. We try to be sure we will put some rules, follow some principles to be sure all developers, will kind of implement their features in the same way, right? So, for example, a convention could be just the structure of your repository, right? You can, usually we have that structure where we use apps and libs for NX, or we can use also the packages, and in the future, NX tries to, let that flexibility and not be strict on that. And here you see a bit what NX is doing, so you can have many projects in your repository. The concept of project is important because it can be an application, it can be a library, it can be a bit anything in your repository. Another convention could be the naming convention, right? We also like in NX in general, but even if you are, also using different type of repository, you will name your files, your folder in different way, right? It's also a convention, right? You decided on one way of working. So that's also a convention. And you have many types of conventions. It can be also the way you will configure your project. I put design system here. It's not directly related to your monorepo, but I like to say it's also a convention, right? To create a way to unify, you unify the way your users will use your applications. Because you specify design system, you created reusable components. So you have that mindset of, of reusability, of unification. The linting rules, same. You want to be sure all of your developers will follow the same way of implementation of the code, right? So any type of alignment. So this is really important. You have to define a lot of different conventions in your way of working. If you're working alone, that's your personal conventions, but when you have many teams and many developers, that's really important to put that in place. And when you define this kind of conventions in your repository, you can also discover that you have different type of project, different type of libraries. For example, you can have libraries that will serve the way you will access to your data in your APIs. You have libraries that will serve the role of just creating UI components. So you will have different project type. And usually, I like to define a project type with 3 types of dimensions. The stack, so the technologies you are using. So if it's, I don't know, can be you are using Jest for that project, or you are using React or whatever. The technology, the role that you will that library will serve. So it can be a feature library or UI library, and the scope, because depending of the team or depending of your product, maybe you will configure your library in different way. When we work in big monorepo, you can have the same technologies, the same role, but the teams will work in a different way, and you want to also define a type based on that. So we saw that the first phase is that the conventions are really important, and we need that mindset first in our central monorepo. We cannot tell to the other repository how they have to work if you don't have that mindset. And this is, if you have a monorepo, this is one of the goals, right? So you have that mindset, good, but it's not enough. You want to maybe provide a way of implementing these conventions. So you want to facilitate the adoptions of these conventions for your developers. So this is where, with NX, I usually implement two polls. You have to implement first a set of NX plugins, because I will show how we can use that. And it's one way, it's just a set of utilities that you will expose to your developers. And you have, on the other hand, the housekeeper, which is more a tool that will help you to be sure developers will use these conventions. It's good to have a set of tools. If you don't use them, it doesn't matter, right? So what is a set of NX plugin? When we come back to the same diagram that we had before, it's directly related to your project type. So we'll create a plugin related to your project type. So maybe we'll have a plugin that will be used for your technology. So a plugin, for example, for specifying conventions for Jest, for example, the way you want to work with Jest or with React. Maybe you will create plugins that will be mixed between, like I said, you will maybe use React in a different way for that product. So you have a plugin that will mix these two. So it's important to have a set of plugins. A different way of saying that is that you have different layers of plugins. So you have the plugins and the community plugins in general. You have plugins already provided by NX. Usually, we can add extra plugins for our repository that will just extend the community plugins. So per technologies, again, we try to, to have the composable pattern mindset. So we try to not have one plugin that do everything. We can compose these plugins. And this is what you will do, for example, if you have a plugin per product, right? You will maybe say, oh, for that product, we use React, Java, OpenAPI, and eslint. So I will combine these plugins into one. So this set of plugins will help you to create a list of utilities for your repository. Finally, what is the plugin in NX? It's just a library. It's a library that inside your monorepo will provide some features to manage your monorepo, to support it, right? So, for example, one of the features we can use in that plugins is we have many different features, and the first one is the code generation. So the code generation is interesting, because you will be able to generate any type of code you want in your monorepo, but in the same way. So when I was talking about conventions, it's important to have, a way to generate code in the same way all the time. So you can generate application, libraries, components, anything you want. And all of the developers, all of the teams that will use that generator will generate their application in the same way. So that's really good for conventions. And then when I was talking about plugin, the way you will structure these generators, you will structure these generators for each type of plugin, right? So here we see that we have generators for the Java plugin. We have also ways to generate applications or library for React. And you can even have a way to generate applications, a library for a specific product somewhere. So we are creating a set of conventions, right? So it was for the code generation. And then we have, the task abstraction. So the command term in NX is the executors. So it's a way to hide the complexity of executing tasks for each technology, right? So you can run a build or a test for a React application, for a Java application, or even for a product. You will always call the same task name, right? And for example, if you are more comfortable with front-end development and you have to build a backend one time, you don't have to think too much. You can go to their configuration, and usually it should be the same if you have that mindset of unification. So developers will be able, to switch between technologies in easier way too. And that are the executors. And again, you will have that feature in each plugin. So you will have your Java plugin that will already contain your generators, and you will add also this executor. So you will really start to create a set of features for each technology. So that's for the task abstraction. And then there is a really interesting one, which is quite new. People that are using NX, they don't use that enough yet, in my opinion. It's a way to, so it's inferred configuration. So it's really directly linked to the configuration of NX. It's a way to remove duplication of configuration. So when you have many projects, so for example, I worked in a monorepo where we had 1,000 projects. So it's 1,000 project configuration each time. And because I said we have the same type of projects, we had a lot of duplications. So NX provides a way to remove those duplications, to say, hey, if I recognize that pattern, then I know I can inject that configuration. I can link that configuration to that project. So for example, here, NX will discover that maybe we have Jest configurations. And if I have that file, I know that probably that project will support test runner for Jest. So I can inject that configuration directly to my project, right? Same for OpenAPI, for example. For any type of pattern, you can inject configuration. So if you have a good, mindset, convention mindset in your structure of your projects, this will be really easy to implement. You can even say, okay, all of the projects, under my product A will have the same way of, you will build it in the same way, you will serve it in the same way, so I can inject the configuration. And that will really remove completely the configurations for your NX configurations. You can even sometimes remove that project.json and just, based on the structure of folder, inject NX configuration. So NX is really going in that direction these days. It tries to be like, a plugin you will add to your editor, right? You don't have to add configurations. You add a plugin for TypeScript, and then each time you open a TypeScript file, you will see some, features that will interact with your code. So NX tries to really go in that direction. So you should just add NX, and automatically you will have all of these features for free without any configurations. Not there yet, but they are going in that direction. And again, you can have this type of configuration in each plugin, and you will, enrich your set of conventions. Okay, one last feature you can have in your plugin, is the central configuration. This is not really directly to an NX plugin, it's just a mindset, for a library in general. When you create a library, when you have many different libraries, again, you will have some duplication. So maybe here I have the same type of library, and I have each time the same Jest configuration all the time that is extending the same main one. What we can do, we can just have a central configuration in that plugin. For example, here, for the TypeScript configuration for Jest can be part of my TypeScript NX plugin, and then I just extend that plugin. That facilitates, the refactoring, for example, or the alignment of all of these configurations. Okay, so, and again, you can have this type of centralization for each plugin. You can have that for Webpack, for eslint, for TypeScript. That's just, a mindset of creating a set of conventions. And then, by doing that, you will have, your set of plugins per technologies, per product, whatever. So that's good. You have all of your conventions, everything is available. Maybe you have a team dedicated to that, but no one is using it, right? They just copy-paste project. They don't use generators. They don't even, use your custom executors. So what can you do with that? So this is what I just explained. You cannot really ensure that. So what you can do, you can create a tool that will, validate that you are using your conventions. So you can really, for example, ensure that the generation of a project, we're using that generator. So you want to be sure the list of generated files are the same. You can also scan your NX configurations and ensure that the executors that you created are used. Same for the infrared configuration or for the central configurations. For us, for example, when I implemented that, it's just a simple tool. We just used the Node.js test runner, and we created a list of tests for that. And we generally execute that list of tests on the CI, and then directly, if someone is not doing something that is, aligned with your conventions, then you just, stop the PR. They have to be aligned. So this is how it looks like, for example. And then we had multiple levels of, criticality. Just to, when we start on an existing monorepo, you have a lot of alignment to do. So you cannot, refactor everything. So what you can do, you can incrementally ask to the teams to, align with the conventions you put in place. And it's a good way also for migrating repositories into Monorepo. Yeah, and that's also a UI we created to really kind of, try to delegate that work to the teams. So each team saw the percentage of, the quality they were respecting, and then they just, kind of prioritize that for the next sprint, for example. And by the way, it's really a recent feature, but NX is also providing this kind of tool today, which is Webpack conformance. So it's also the same approach, really the same idea, where you can configure a list of rules that will validate that your repository is following some conventions. All right, so we really focused on the central monorepo, and I insist on that, even if you don't, have a distributed monorepo. Having the mindset of conventions, having this NX plugins architecture, plus a tool that is validating that you are following those conventions is really helpful. Because even when you have new developers starting a new project in your monorepo, you don't have to explain everything. The conventions are specified, so it's written in the rock, right? They will see directly what they have to do. Okay, so we have everything ready, everything is working well, and now we want to spread those conventions to the other repository. And NX is providing 3 different features for that. So we have the presets, the migrations, and the release. So let's focus first on the preset and what is an NX preset. So if you don't know yet, when you start with NX from scratch, you can generate a monorepo structure by using that CLI command, sorry. So it's just create NX workspace, and it will generate everything. It will, prompt some questions about which technology you want to use. So you have different presets. For example, you can generate an Angular or React or even, a Gradle monorepo today. And what is really good with NX is that it will configure all of the tools for you. You don't have to think about that. If you use Jest, everything will be configured. You just have to run NX test, and it will work. You don't have to configure anything. And what you can do, you can create your custom preset too, if you want. So it's a feature that NX is providing. What is that custom preset? A custom preset, mainly, it's just a generator that will generate an empty workspace first, and then will, let you add to generate other type of code if you want. So if you have really customization that you want to do, like CI configurations or anything you want to do on that new monorepo, you can do it with the preset. And then you will be able to use that CLI command with your preset directly. So you can generate that distributed monorepo with everything set up from the scratch. They don't have to do anything. The second feature is the NX migrations. So the NX migrations is the way to maintain your NX monorepo. So today, if you are already using NX, each time you want to upgrade NX, you are using that command, and automatically NX will upgrade everything and modify your code also. For example, if they modified some stuff in Jest, then they will also modify your files, and automatically your repository will be upgraded. It's based on versions mainly. And again, you can use that feature for your repository. So if you want, for example, to maintain your distributed monorepo and do some modification automatically, and you don't want, just to ask them to do it, you can write migrations to do that. So you can today generate a migration in your repository by using a generator. Yeah, so just to also focus on that, we have NX is providing many generators for free, right, that you can use, and you don't have to think how you have to structure that in your monorepo. You just call it, and it will generate something in your monorepo at the correct place, and you just have to implement it. So the migration, mainly, it will create a file, a JSON file that will contain a list of generators and a list of packages. So each time you will execute a migration on a distributed monorepo, it will just execute, a generator is just a function, so it will just call these functions, and then these functions will allow you to interact with that monorepo. So you can, for example, align the project with the new generators. For example, you did some modifications in your generators, and you have to apply that also to the distributed monorepo. Or, change the executors, anything you want, you can do it. And another aspect, which is because it's something we do a lot, when you upgrade your libraries, it will also align the package.json of this distributed monorepo with the libraries you are using in your central monorepo. So it's really a good way to maintain the distributed monorepo. And yeah, another interesting thing is it's also something you can put in your NX plugin architecture, right? It's a feature provided by default by the NX plugin type of library. All right, so we saw how we can generate a repository. We saw how we can maintain it, right? Now let's see how we need to, publish all of that, right? It's still in your central monorepo. And for that, NX provide a feature, which is the NX release, that will, manage everything you need to do a release for your set of, plugins, preset, and housekeeper. So usually I like to call that a dev kit. So you have that mindset of, OK, I will provide a dev kit to my distributed monorepo, and that dev kit will contain everything. It will contain all of my plugins with all of the features, so all of the generators, the executors, anything they need to use for using my tool. I will also provide the housekeeper to be sure they are still in line with what we specify in my central monorepo. And I will also provide the CLI preset to be sure they can generate a new repository if they want. I will now dive too deep in the NX release. If you want to know more about that, you can check the documentation. But this is well integrated in your monorepo, and you don't have to think about bumping the version and trying to know how to generate a changelog. It's supported by default, and you have a simple command. All right, so we now have all of our conventions available. They can use it, but how they can use it in a way. So we just need to know 3 commands, and even less, because the first one will be the way we will generate our new monorepo. So usually they just have to use to call that command only once. And then, as you can see, I'm using the CLI here, create NX workspace, and I specify my presets. And because it's available, for example, on an NPM registry, it will use it. The second command will be the migrate command. That one will be used more often, because each time you make a modification in your set of conventions, so in your NX plugins architecture, and you will publish a new convention, a new version, then they will be able to use that command, and they will first execute all migration scripts, but they will also take for free all of the new generators, the new executors, the new infrared configuration by default. So they don't have to think too much about that. And the last one, yeah, again, you don't have to know too much that command, but usually we put that on the CLI, on the CI, sorry, I'm mixing the words. And they don't have to touch that too much, and they will just validate that they are still in line with the central monorepo. So it's just, yeah, an interesting way to be sure you can support many different repositories. So it's not a question of polyrepo or monorepo, it's more a question of the context, what is your business and what you want to achieve. So both are valuable, especially in that type of use case when you have, sorry, clicking too fast, a distributed monorepo architecture with a central monorepo and multiple distributed monorepo. We saw that we can achieve that in 4 different phases. The first one is that we really have to focus on having that conventions mindset. Then you need to provide tools, utilities to be sure you will facilitate the adoptions of those conventions. You need also to be sure they are used. And then you can also use some extra features of NX, like the preset, the migrations, and the release to expose those conventions to the public world. And then, yeah, you let the distributed monorepo manage by themselves the upgrade and maintenance of their repository in a simple way. All right? So if you want to have more details about that, I wrote an article related to that concept, so you will find the same slides and the same explanation here. And I have other NX article on my blog if you are interested by NX. And yeah, thank you everyone. You can find me on many social media. And if you need some supports on NX or even microfrontend architecture or improving your software development cycle, do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you very much.